So I know Saul would have been very pleased by all the people who came. Rutgers meant so much to him, and I think just about every person in this room meant a lot to him. I sort of went through a few stages of knowing Saul, and all of them I can say that my first impression of Saul was intimidating. I remember starting as a graduate student in AI, getting the Readings in AI textbook, of which the first paper in the collection was Saul's 1968 paper about representing the missionaries and cannibals problem, which I can solve by myself. Not a wise thing to do once a year. And Saul had this habit when he writes papers of writing these very, very long, intimidating papers. Anyone who's tried to read his papers know. They can be really intimidating. But those who knew Saul well also knew that there was a sort of a, maybe it's too strong to say whimsical side, but the very fact that these really intense papers were about things like the missionaries and cannibals problem, Towers of Hanoi. Just to give people who aren't in AI a little sense of his contributions, in the early days of AI, people were still struggling with how do we approach building a computational artifact that behaved intelligently. And humans are existence proofs of this, but it's so overwhelming. How do you struggle with solving the whole problem? And so people were identifying individual problems that appeared to be manageable in isolation, and Saul was the person who really focused on the importance of representing a problem in a computer to being able to solve it effectively and efficiently. And even though he narrowed it down to problems like puzzles like missionaries and cannibals, we're still struggling to make even modest gains on these problems. The next time I met Saul was when he gave a talk at Carnegie Mellon when I was my final year of graduate school. They were visiting Tom Mitchell, who I'm glad was able to make it. And he gave a talk right after his time at DARPA, where he was describing his experiences at DARPA. And any of you who've seen him give a talk know that he can fit more on a slide than any person I've ever met. I mean, it's beyond comprehension how much he got onto a slide. Very intimidating, but again, very intimidating, I guess, was the experience. So it was with great trepidation when I was interviewing at Rutgers and I finally got to meet Saul Amarel personally. And Saul is an intimidating person when you first met him. And I'm glad I came to Rutgers. Tom Mitchell gave me the advice, every week go by, ask him out to lunch. And I started to get to know Saul pretty well. But the turning point for me was one day he came to my office, and for those of you who know me, I have lots of toys and puzzles in my office. And he sat down, he picked up a Slinky that was in my office and started playing with a Slinky. And I'll just pause for those who know Saul to picture Saul with a Slinky. It doesn't quite work, but it worked. I saw a different side of Saul, and so Saul's relationship with me personally, I think, is very much a microcosm of his relationship to this university, to his department, probably to each of us here. He cared very deeply about people, about success, about people doing good. From my first days at Rutgers, he was very forceful, trying to push me in directions that he thought would be enhancing for my career. He was, in many ways, sort of a father figure for the department, in that, at least for me personally, anytime there was any sort of challenging issue, you always knew that Saul was there, the same way you know that a parent is there when you have a personal problem. They're always there unconditionally to help you without imposing their own agendas, their own needs. And Saul was someone who you could always go to, and he would give you his advice from the heart about what he thought was best. People mentioned how hard he works. It's unfortunate the timing of this makes it unable for Lou Steinberg to be here, but he and I and others, I saw Doyle Knight here, many of us have worked on grant proposals with him. Saul had this habit of, most people would view the FedEx last pickup deadline as the deadline. Saul, because you'd have to get a proposal in by a particular time, Saul viewed the last flight to Washington as the deadline. And quite a few of us, I know Don Smith, myself, have actually gone on that airplane flight or driven down to madly deliver this proposal that he was up all night working on to get it out. Saul worked hard. Tenacity was a word that was used. Just great energy in the things he did. Email at all hours. Known by many just as a good-hearted person. I remember him telling a story about how Rutgers alumni, who was the vice president of Xerox, took the company plane and flew out our President Lawrence and Saul out to Xerox Park. And they went to visit, and everywhere he was going through Xerox Park, he was meeting people left and right who were coming up and saying, "Hi, Saul, how are you doing?" And President Lawrence was so amazed. But anyone who's here knows, I mean, the breadth of disciplines that are represented in this room. Saul knew everyone and cared and had a direct impact on a broad range of people. So there's so many stories I share. Saul's Saul Levy's view. I don't even know where to begin to share just some of these, but for those of you who've lost a parent, you know how the absence of this stabilizing force that you can always turn to is it's a great loss to not have that. And Saul was very much that for me, and I think for many of us here. And it's still a struggle to imagine what life will be like without him.
Now I would like to ask two colleagues, close collaborators and in the early stage of career, members of the faculty at Rutgers, Tom Mitchell, who is currently a professor at Carnegie Mellon University, and Sri Sridharan, who came also large distance to this event. So,
I apologize. Yeah. Sorry, Tom. I had a letter I was going to read, and I kind of got a little overwhelmed and didn't read it. I just wanted to share with you, Dave Waltz is the president of NEC Research. He's the past president of the American Association of Artificial Intelligence, an ACM fellow, and he unfortunately couldn't make it here. Thank you. And so I had been talking to Dave Wednesday morning, and so I asked Dave if he could send me a note to read at his retirement party. And so Dave sent it to me, but also CC'd Saul Amarel, who replied at about 12:30 Wednesday afternoon. So this may have been one of the last things he did on the computer before he left. But I did want to read both Dave's letter as well as Saul's reply. Saul, I'm very sad that I'll not be able to attend your retirement party, but I wanted to send you my best wishes and let you know that I'll be there in spirit, if not in body. And he goes on to explain why he's in Florida right now. Your retirement represents a real milestone for me as well as you. You were one of the first people in AI of whom I was aware when I started out in the field, and you played major roles in research at DARPA and at Rutgers that have dramatically affected the field. This also triggers my recollection of our wonderful trip to China in 1984. It reminds me that I still have not made a copy of my China videotape for you, something I'll rectify in January when I get back. Please accept my thanks for all you've done, congratulations on your stellar career, and my best wishes for your retirement. And classic Saul response, Dave, thanks for your good wishes and your kind words on the occasion of my retirement. My best to you and Bonnie for an enjoyable vacation in Florida. Let's try to get together for lunch in Princeton when you're back. I have great memories of our trip to China in 1984. You were going around like those TV reporters, taking in everything and everyone. It was very special. Talking about AI memories, I always admired your early work in constraint satisfaction. I referred to it many times. I think this work did have a definite impact on the field. Best regards, Saul. And I apologize that I hadn't read this, but I think this really summarizes Saul. It wasn't just thanking him for pleasant comments about the retirement, but really also returning with encouraging comments to Dave. And I think all of us know that's what Saul was.